The message came in while I was reviewing the final numbers for a multi-state acquisition. December 23rd. Snow sliding down the glass walls of my Manhattan office. The city glowing the way it always does when it pretends nothing can touch it. Sweetheart, with your brother bringing his new fiancée home for Christmas, we thought it might be better if you skipped this year. You understand how appearances matter. I stared at the text. No anger, no shock, just that familiar, quiet realization. After everything I'd built, everything I'd survived, everything I'd become, I was still the inconvenient one. What my mother didn't know was that the independent consultant she barely acknowledged was the same woman quietly controlling the deal her family's future depended on. And Christmas was about to expose everything. My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 36 years old, financially independent, and painfully underestimated by the people who raised me. To the outside world, I'm discreet, unflashy, the kind of woman people assume is still figuring things out. I let them believe that, because power doesn't need applause, it needs timing, and my family had no idea their timing had finally run out. I grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey, in a home where success had a very specific shape. My father, Thomas Brooks, built a respected regional investment firm from the ground up, not flashy, but influential, the kind of man who measured worth in square footage, titles, and dinner guests. My mother, Diane, perfected the art of support. She hosted, she smiled, she never challenged him in public. My younger brother, Evan, was everything they understood. Business school, confident handshake, loud ambition. And then there was me, quiet, observant, uninterested in impressing anyone. From an early age, I learned something important. In my family, silence was mistaken for weakness, so I stayed silent and watched everything. I wasn't rebellious, I was independent. I didn't ask for approval, I didn't announce plans. I left for college without drama, moved to New York without fanfare, built my career without asking for validation. At family gatherings, I was introduced vaguely. This is Elena, she does consulting. No one asked more. And I never corrected them, because every time I tried explaining my work, eyes glazed over, so I stopped explaining. They never asked why I worked impossible hours, why my calls came from private numbers, why I never worried about money but never flaunted it. They assumed modesty meant limitation. In reality, I worked in strategic acquisitions and restructuring, quiet deals, private capital, influence without a spotlight. I didn't chase visibility, I controlled outcomes. The first hint that my family needed me again came months before the Christmas text. My father's firm had been struggling. Nothing public, nothing dramatic, just stalled growth, missed expansion opportunities, a quiet dependence on a single upcoming partnership, a partnership with a firm they called Limelight Advisory. They had no idea who owned it, and I had no intention of correcting that yet. The text from my mother wasn't cruel, that was the problem. It was polite, reasonable, carefully worded, the kind of message that erases you without admitting it. I read it twice, then placed my phone face down and finished my work. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. People who value appearances never notice when the foundation shifts beneath them. Limelight Advisory wasn't just another firm. It was the key to my father's next phase: international access, capital flow, credibility. Without it, his firm would plateau permanently, and the contract sat on my desk, waiting. I didn't reply to my mother. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Silence has weight, and I wanted them to feel it. Instead, I sent one message to my assistant: pause all external signings until further notice. That included my father's firm. It's strange how families confuse familiarity with entitlement. They assume access is permanent, support is automatic, presence is guaranteed, until one day the quiet one steps away, not dramatically, not angrily, but completely, and the structure they relied on realizes too late what it lost. I didn't destroy anything. I simply stopped holding it together alone, And sometimes that's all it takes. The first sign of panic didn't come from my parents, it came from the market. A subtle shift, an unusual delay, a hesitation where confidence used to live. My father's firm had always thrived on perception, not dominance, momentum, and momentum is fragile when it's built on borrowed certainty. 3 days after the Christmas message, my assistant forwarded an internal inquiry. Lynbrook Capital, my father's firm, had requested a revised timeline on the Limelight Advisory Partnership. They weren't demanding, they were asking. That alone told me everything. Firms that are winning don't ask for patience, they assume it. I said nothing. Silence isn't absence, it's leverage. Limelight Advisory wasn't a sudden success. It was the result of 10 years of deliberate invisibility. While my family hosted dinners and attended galas, I built networks that never posed for photos. Private equity groups, international intermediaries, regulatory consultants who solved problems before they became headlines. My father believed power came from being seen. I knew better. Power comes from being needed. My mother called first, not accusatory, not apologetic, careful. She asked how work was going, mentioned the weather, laughed lightly as if we were close again. Then she said it. "Your father's under a lot of stress right now. This partnership means a great deal to him." I listened. I didn't respond immediately. Then I said something simple. "I'm sure he'll manage." The silence on the other end stretched thin. My brother followed the next day. His tone was different, casual, almost dismissive. He joked about Christmas, about how dramatic Mom could be, about how things would go back to normal once the deal closed, once I was established. That word again, established, as if the life I'd built didn't exist unless they could point to it. I didn't correct him. People reveal more when they think you're beneath them. Behind the scenes, things were accelerating. Limelight Advisory had finalized a parallel acquisition, one that directly affected my father's expansion strategy. Perfectly legal, perfectly timed. If the partnership didn't close by the end of the quarter, Lynbrook Capital would lose its competitive window entirely. They didn't know that yet, but they were starting to feel it. The invitation came from my father himself, formal, polite, urgent. He wanted a family meeting, not at home, at the Limelight offices. That alone told me how serious it had become. He wanted control, but on neutral ground. I agreed. The morning of the meeting, I arrived early. I chose the larger conference room, floor-to-ceiling glass, a skyline that didn't need explanation. I dressed deliberately, not extravagant, not modest, exact. Because presentation isn't vanity, it's language. They arrived together. My father first, tense, focused, already calculating. My mother close behind, eyes scanning, adjusting. My brother trailing, confident, unaware. They didn't recognize the space. They didn't recognize the people. They didn't recognize the authority in the room. Not yet. They assumed the CEO would arrive later. They assumed I was there as support, as background, as always. I let them sit, let them talk, let them speculate, because there's power in letting people speak freely when they believe they're still in control. Sitting across from them, something became clear. They weren't cruel, they were comfortable, comfortable dismissing me, comfortable underestimating me, comfortable believing success had one face, and it wasn't mine. That comfort was about to cost them everything. My assistant opened the door, introduced me properly. Title, role, authority. The room changed temperature. My father didn't speak. My mother didn't smile. My brother blinked. Once, twice, as if the words hadn't landed. They looked at me differently then, not as family, as a variable they hadn't accounted for. And that's when fear replaces familiarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't confront them emotionally. I didn't need to. This wasn't about proving my worth. This was about revealing consequences. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected, not because I delayed, but because no one knew how to respond. Authority has weight, and when it suddenly shifts direction, people don't rush toward it. They pause, They recalibrate. They search their memory for the version of you that made sense before. My family was doing exactly that, and failing. My father cleared his throat. He adjusted his posture the way he always did before asserting dominance. But this time, the room didn't respond. No one leaned in, no one nodded, no one waited for his cue. The board members were watching me, not him. That was the first fracture he couldn't ignore. I didn't raise my voice again. I didn't confront them emotionally. I didn't need to. This wasn't about proving my worth. This was about revealing consequences. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected, not because I delayed, but because no one knew how to respond. Authority has weight, and when it suddenly shifts direction, people don't rush toward it. They pause. They recalibrate. They search their memory for the version of you that made sense before. My family was doing exactly that, and failing. My father cleared his throat. He adjusted his posture the way he always did before asserting dominance. But this time, the room didn't respond. No one leaned in. No one nodded. No one waited for his cue. The board members were watching me, not him. That was the first fracture he couldn't ignore. I didn't begin with emotion. I began with data. Market projections, risk exposure, the missed window they were already sliding past. I didn't accuse, I didn't remind them of Christmas, I didn't mention the text. I didn't need to. The numbers told the story better than I ever could. Every assumption they had made relied on one thing remaining true, that I would stay invisible. My brother leaned back in his chair. Slowly, his confidence dissolved into something else. Recognition. He saw the structure, the reach, the planning that hadn't happened overnight. This wasn't a reaction. This was a decade in motion. My mother's hands tightened in her lap. She wasn't thinking about business. She was thinking about memory. Every moment she'd smoothed over, every warning she'd whispered, every time she'd chosen peace over fairness, all of it converged here. My father spoke again, this time quieter. He talked about family, about loyalty, about history. He framed it like an appeal, but appeals only work when the other side still needs permission. I didn't. I explained the decision, calmly, cleanly. The partnership would not proceed. The acquisition would move forward independently. Limelight Advisory would no longer wait, not out of spite, out of strategy. That distinction mattered. My father's expression changed, not to anger, to disbelief. Because for the first time, he wasn't losing to a competitor, he was losing to the child he had discounted. That kind of loss rewrites a person's identity. My mother didn't cry. She looked small, not weak, just suddenly aware of how much control she never actually had. People expect triumph to feel loud. It doesn't. It feels quiet, grounded, like standing in a space that finally matches the effort you put into building it. I didn't feel joy, I felt alignment, and that was enough. The headlines came quickly. Speculation, analysis, quiet questions about succession. Lynbrook Capital didn't collapse. It diminished, slowly, publicly, irreversibly. Momentum doesn't forgive miscalculation. Family dinners stopped being invitations. They became requests, careful ones. My mother reached out first, not to ask for help, to ask how I was. That difference mattered. My brother followed. No excuses, no justifications, just acknowledgement. He finally understood what it cost to always be second to perception. I didn't move closer. I didn't step back. I stayed where I was. Because independence isn't punishment, it's clarity. They were allowed back into my life, not into my authority. That line stayed firm. They thought success would make me return. It didn't. It made me choose. And that's the difference between power and approval. Approval asks, power decides. Some families confuse familiarity with entitlement. They assume access is permanent, support is automatic, presence is guaranteed. Until one day, the quiet one steps away, not dramatically, not angrily, but completely. and the structure they relied on realizes too late what it lost. I didn't destroy anything. I simply stopped holding it together alone, and sometimes that's all it takes.